to Ukraine, because I did notice that mainstream media, at least Morning Joe, is now acknowledging that Ukraine is not winning this battle against Russia, which I think a lot of us in left independent media predicted that this was going to happen anyway. We knew that Ukraine was not going to be able to beat Russia, even with the billions of dollars of aid that came from the US government in reference to weapons, et cetera. We knew how powerful Russia's military is. Also, Russia has a neighbor next door to them called China, that if they need to knock on their door and say, come help us out, then we're looking at potential, World War III. But mainstream media is now admitting that Ukraine is not going to be able to win this. So the question that I have is, number one, why do you think they are now finally acknowledging that this isn't going to happen? And two, what do you think this means in reference to the possibility of a World War III? Where do you think the U.S. government will act next?
Well, with the Ukraine, what I'll say is this. Generally speaking, the American people are the most ignorant people in the world about the world they live in. We don't know anything about the world that's outside our borders. Well, we don't even know anything about our own borders. I mean, people who live in there are people who live in Albany all their lives. Their big adventure is going to New York City or going to Disneyland. That's it. They don't know anything about Mississippi. They don't know anything about Alabama, California. Ignorant about their country, and God forbid now we talk about the complexities of Canada or what's going on in Mexico. And then you move down to Latin America, South America, they're confused. They can't even point Ukraine on the map. And so these ignorant people, including, by the way, all the talking heads on TV, I've met them all. There was a time when I was actually invited to be on all those shows. Back when Bill Clinton was getting beat up and the Republicans thought that my message was cool, so I could be on Good Morning America. Me and Katie Couric were cutting the rug and all this kind of stuff. Dan Rather and I were having beer afterwards, and Tom Brokaw invited me to his Christmas parties. I mean, I was in, and but then suddenly I became inconvenient because the truth became inconvenient because suddenly a different president came in and different messaging, and boom, done. But I met them all. They're dumber than dirt. Truly are dumber than dirt. These are people that read what is put on the teleprompter in front of them, and they don't have any depth, none. Their producers own their brains. And I'm dead serious. And any of you big name people out there, all you talking heads, if you disagree with me, I challenge you right now to a debate, anytime, anywhere, drop of the hat. Let's do it. Let's hook and jab on stage in front of an audience and find out who is shallow and who's deep. They are dumber than dirt, just like the audience they talk to. And when it comes to an issue like Russia, we're gripped here in the United States with Russophobia. It's a fear of Russia, an unnatural fear of Russia. Ask people about Russia. They don't know anything about Russia, Sabrina. Nothing. They know nothing about Russia. And so suddenly they're told Vladimir Putin's this evil dude. And they go, yeah, he's evil. Why? Well, Tom Brokaw told me so. Or, so somebody told me he was evil, but they don't know who he is. They don't know where he came from. He was KGB. Really? Wow. That's a lot of knowledge there, guy. He's also a taxi driver in St. Petersburg. When he got out of the KGB in the decade of the 1990s, was one of the worst decades in Russian history, that millions of Russians lost their lives because of the policies that we imposed on those people. We empowered oligarchs who stole money from the pensioners, leaving them homeless in apartments that suddenly became valuable only after the pensioners were removed. So mafia gangs went around and murdered millions of pensioners to steal their apartments and sell them to make money for the oligarchs who then fed that money back to us. I bet most Americans don't know that. That's what created Vladimir Putin. He's a guy who came into power in 1999, New Year's Day, by New Year's Eve, and took a broken country. And since then, he's been trying to rebuild it and lead it out. And we resent this because we thought we had beaten the Soviet Union at the end of the Cold War. We thought we could keep Russia down. We had a compliant tool in there named Boris Yeltsin, who's willing to do anything we asked him to do, sell his country down the road. And suddenly a guy comes in named Vladimir Putin and says, I'm not playing that game anymore. I'm a Russian. I'm going to do what's good for Russia. Doesn't mean I'm anti-you, but I'm pro-me. And he started to do this, and we resented him. And this resentment led to us not trying to understand Russia. John F. Kennedy gave a speech at the American University in June of 1963. It's considered one of the best speeches he ever gave. But one of the things he talks about there is the need to not necessarily agree with Russia or the Soviet Union at that time on everything, but to understand their point of view, their perspective, that before we make a final decision, we have to put ourselves in their shoes and see the problem from their perspective. And once we do that, we might understand why they're doing what they're doing, and maybe we won't fear it as much. Maybe we can work together with them. I can guarantee you right now that if every American took the time to put themselves in the shoes of the Russians, go back to the 1990s and see what it's like to live there. Have your relatives commit suicide by alcoholism, just jump off a building, die of sclerosis, you name it, it happened. It was bad. Or if they were a pensioner, and when I say a pensioner in the 1990s, I'm talking about the people who saved the world in World War II. The Soviet Union lost 27 million people. They were the number one killer of Nazis out there. And that generation are the pensioners that we're talking about. The people that saved the world, stood up to Nazi Germany, saved the world, are being murdered by gangs for their apartments. You got to put yourself in their shoes and understand the miracle that's taken place in Russia. I was just there last May. I have to tell you, clean, well organized, the economy's working, and great people. Just like the Iraqis, the Russians are great people. They are welcoming, they're friendly, they're educated, they're cultured, they're everything that we claim they're not. But this Russophobia has allowed the media and the government to shape the minds of the Americans so that we accept anything at face value. We don't know why Russia went in. We're just told that Russia brutally invaded Ukraine. Nobody's told about the Maidan in 2014, the coup that was orchestrated by the CIA, the European Union, the United States, Victoria Nuland's role in that, Miss neocon, handing out cookies to people as if she was just there to hand out cookies, not to promote the elevation of neo-Nazi parties. Remember, we talked about World War II, defeating the Nazis. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Google Stepan Bandera, why don't you? He is the national hero of Ukraine. They worship this dude. They name streets after him. They have statues for him. That guy slaughtered 30 to 40,000 Jews. He killed over 110,000 Poles, and he killed over 200,000 Russians because he is a white racist. It's not me saying that. It's the CIA saying that, MI6 saying that. The U.S. Congress acknowledges that the supporters of Bandera are white supremacists, neo-Nazi supporters, but they're the ones we put in power. And then we turned around, we expanded NATO after we said we weren't going to expand NATO. Remember the deal that was cut with Gorbachev in 1989, 1990, when Germany was to unify. Not 1 inch eastward, we promised, not 1 inch. And then we expanded. We lie through our teeth. Every time our lips move, it's a lie. And the Russians are looking at this going, what are you doing? You're expanding to our borders, and now you empower Stepan Bandera ideology in Ukraine. We can't accept this. We won't allow it to happen. There was a conflict because these Banderas declared ethnic war on the ethnic Russians, and they tried to commit genocide against them. Study what happened in Mariupol. Study what happened in Odessa, a city on the Black Sea, when the Banderas went down there in May, burning to death 48 Russians hundreds were jammed into a building. They set it on fire. And then as the people tried to come out, they shot them. They compelled the others to run back in the building and die of smoke inhalation and flames. And then the bodies were on the street. And these wonderful people whom we fund today go around and kick the bodies, spit on them to make sure they're dead. Good people, good democratic people. We empowered them. And the Russians said, hell no. And so the ethnic Russian people rose up and fought against them. It became a conflict from 2014 until 2015. Interestingly, in 2015, when the Russians intervened, they surrounded the Ukrainian army, and they had 25,000 of them surrounded. They were going to kill them all. Now, I know we're not supposed to enjoy death and destruction, but the Russians had them good. And suddenly France and Germany step in and say, don't kill those Ukrainians, please, Vladimir Putin, don't kill them. We can make peace. And he said, how? These guys are all about ethnic genocide against the Russian people. We can't allow this to happen. No, let them go. And we will have a peace accord called the Minsk Accords. And we guarantee we're going to make it work. And Putin said, okay, I believe in peace. And he let 25,000 Ukrainian soldiers go. And then from 2015 to 2022, NATO started training the Ukrainian army. NATO put out a slide that said, we train a battalion of Ukrainian troops to NATO standard every 55 days here in Western Ukraine. Then they drew an arrow to the east so they can kill Russians here. NATO's bragging about that. That's the mission. The whole mission was to buy time. It wasn't about peace. It was to buy time for the Ukrainians to build an army capable of defeating the Russians. And here's where you can criticize Putin. He actually believed the West when they said they wanted peace. And he kept pushing for peace, pushing for peace, pushing for peace until he's finally betrayed. And then what he said is, okay, I don't believe in Minsk. So what we need instead of Minsk is a new European security framework. He put forward 2 draft treaties in December of 2021, one to the US, one to NATO, and said, if you don't want a war in Ukraine, all we have to do is sit down and talk about this. Just talk about it. Take it seriously. We ignored it, pushed it off. And then we got surprised when he invaded. And when he invaded, people like me thought he's going to roll to Kiev and take it over because the Russian army, of course, was unstoppable. But that wasn't their purpose. Russia was never trying to take over Ukraine. The purpose of the initial military operation was to get the Ukrainians to the negotiating table to bring a rapid end to this war. And it almost worked. 3 sessions in Gomel, Belarus, 2 sessions in Turkey. The last session, the Ukrainians signed an agreement. You know what the agreement would have given them? All the territory that Russia occupied would be returned, except Crimea. Russia said, you ain't never getting that back because that's Russian. The Donbass, independent with the referendum. But everything else that Russia occupied would get. And what the Russians did as a proof of good faith is they voluntarily withdrew from Kiev and from northern Ukraine and said, there it is, confidence building measure. We withdrew. We promised to withdraw from every place. All you have to do is sign here and say, we won't join NATO. That's it. We won't join NATO. War's over. Boris Johnson flies in with the support of the CIA, the United States, and says, don't accept that deal. We can beat the Russians. We're going to give you all the money and equipment in the world. And the stupid Ukrainians went, we'll take that deal. Today, if they had taken that deal, 400,000 Ukrainian soldiers would be alive today. 10 to 20 million Ukrainians would have their homes. Millions of children would have a stable life, be going to school, getting the education that they need to be good citizens. Instead, an entire nation has been destroyed. Ukraine's lost 20% of its territory because Russia afterwards said, we can never allow you to govern territory where there's an ethnic majority population. And so Russia took Zaporizhia, took Kherson, took Donetsk, took Lugansk, had referendums and brought them in. They said, you're never getting that back. But Ukraine could have had all that territory had they just accepted peace. Russia is the only nation out there that's been trying to have a peaceful outcome to this war. But now Russia's at a point where they say, we can't negotiate with Zelensky. We can't trust him or the West anymore. We don't trust them. We're going to win on our terms. And they're winning, and they're winning decisively. And what's happened is all the lies that people were telling about Russia were being accepted at face value by a population who knows nothing about Russia. You can't lie anymore because it's so obvious what's happening right now. You can't spin it away. And so Ukraine has lost. All that money we poured in is gone. All those tanks we sent them, they're gone. All those men we trained, they're dead. And Ukraine has nothing left to replace them.